It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I'm going to start off with a couple of interesting moments I had this weekend that really have been sticking on my mind. And this stuff happens to me quite often. You go to meetings, you go to places where people recognize you. I get this a lot, so it's not unusual, but it's another one of those things that makes me go, man, I wish I could solve this. I wish I could fix it. But I had a guy come up to me, and a guy I work with, and he goes, "Hey, you're that guy on the radio." And I said, yeah, that's me. He goes, I listened to you, and I agree with everything you said. And it's like, this, my gosh, I can't believe it. And I'm going, oh, okay, yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. He goes, and I listened again, and I agree with everything you said. You're right. And I go, well, thank you. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you'll continue to listen. And kind of left it there. And it's one of those moments where you go, that's great, but you're wearing a Trump hat. How do you square the two? You vote for Republicans. How do you square the two that you agree with me, that I'm right, but yet you vote against your own interest because evidently what I'm talking about you agree with on manufacturing, on education, on healthcare, on you name the things that we've been talking about that I'm right about, and yet still voting against. And this is what's driving me crazy. And I've had a number of these conversations where it's come back to, I'll quiz people then. Okay, if you agree with me, why the hat? Why do you participate in this? What is it about that draws you there when you agree with me when I'm telling you that, yeah, this is what this administration is doing, and I think doing well, and you agree with what I'm talking about. And what's interesting, that the response that I get back quite often is, well, you're one of us. You're a working guy like I am. You're not one of them. And I'm often struck by that, because I started this show almost 20 years ago because no one was talking to working people. My truck driver buddies, they were only listening to Limbaugh and Hannity and, the right-wing platter of crazy, telling them that, you don't need that stinking union. Those unions are no good for you. You'd make more money if you didn't have one. In fact, that line alone is what made me start doing radio. I had a guy literally come up to me and go, we'd make more money if there was no union here. And immediately I said, where is that happening? And if there is a place that's paying higher wages than you're making here, why aren't you there? And it was that moment where the guy, kind of stopped and, walked away. And a couple of days later came back to me and said, I've been thinking about that. And, no one ever posed that. And when I started this, it was about giving the other side. It was about adding balance. Now understand, over these last 20 years, the right-wing media has just gotten much more powerful. From morning to night, day in, day out. You can just be inundated with right-wing insanity. And it's all the same message. It's all outrage. It's all to get you to continue to listen, to be angry. to not solve problems. The problems are important. The issues are important. But the issues are important not to be fixed, not to be solved, but to be exploited, to keep us pitted against each other, so that working people don't talk to each other, and they're supposed to hate each other. And you get that kind of vibe. And when I tell my lefty friends that, I don't hate the people I work with. I think they're misguided politically. I think they listen to the wrong people. I think they have some bad ideas. But I don't think they're horrible people. I think they're reachable. I think if we talk to them, I think if I'm a believer that, I don't care who you are, we can sit down and have a beer, and we can hammer out ideas, and we can argue and still not have to kill each other. I still somewhat believe that. I don't know how I'm going to hold that on much longer. But the reality is working people, especially the white working class, Democrats in the left have left behind. They don't talk to them. And I've said one of the reasons that I think that I'm so successful in doing what I do is I have the credibility of being someone who has calluses on my hands, that my back aches at the end of the day just like theirs, that my knees are shot, my hips are bad, that I've worked my butt off for 35 years in a manual labor job that to be honest has gotten much worse over the years, just like they have. I've struggled and sacrificed just as they have. Only I see things a little bit differently. I don't allow myself to get pulled into the outrage candy that's being force-fed to us, to where we're the enemy, to where we have to tear each other apart, while the guy who has never really worked a day in his life walks away with all of the spoils. So when I start talking to these folks about the issues that I think are important, the fact that we've got a tax code that's rigged against work, and the guy who did it was Donald Trump, they listen. They may not agree, but they listen. The guy who took their ability to write off their union dues off of their taxes was Donald Trump. The person who ensured that the very wealthy in this country got even wealthier were all of the parties, but mostly Republicans. When you look at the tax code changes that have happened in my lifetime, we have created a massive billionaire class. In fact, I had this conversation with someone, and I said, look, the reality is in 1953, we had a top marginal tax rate of 92%. If you made over, I think it was like $1.6 million in today's money back then, that dollar over $1.6 million, you paid 92% tax on. All the way up until 1962, I think it was, when Kennedy lowered to 70. And that 70% rate stayed all the way until Ronald Reagan became president, to when he dropped it all the way down to 28%. And then you saw this explosion of federal debt because we didn't have the revenue coming in. We didn't have the money coming in, but we were told, no. Don't believe what your common sense thought, that if you lower the rate, more money will come in. Don't believe your mind when it says, what? We're going to cut taxes on rich people. They're going to keep more of the money, but somehow we're going to magically have more. Didn't happen. We created a lot of debt. But we created a large billionaire class. And how do they use that money? Well, they use that money to divide us even further. And they've done a masterful job. To where now when I look at the sad reality is every one of the podcasts that are out there that focus on working people, most of it's the crazy stuff. It's all about the division. It's not about solving problems. And one of the things that I like to think about that we do here at this program is solutions. How do we move forward? How do we make lives better? When we went to numerous communities across this country, it was about, hey, how do we restore the pride that came with being a manufacturing community? A community like Akron, Ohio, that made, tires. A community like Toledo, Ohio, was the glass capital of the world. Clare, Wisconsin, was rubber. You go down the list of all of the towns that we went through. That that central factory was the heartbeat of that community. And when it was gone, well, the identity was gone, and so was the sanity. And this is where, I said, look, we used to have pro-labor Republicans. We don't anymore. I don't know of any pro-labor Republicans left. And I point to South Carolina. Just recently, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster's gave his State of the State address. And where, much like Nikki Haley did the whole, I'll wear pointy shoes so I can kick those labor unions. He said that he would fight labor all the way to the gates of hell. Yeah. Now understand, South Carolina has one thing going for them. They have the lowest union density rate in the entire country, and have for years. They've held that title for a very long time, and they're proud of it. They're proud of the fact that they have a union density rate of just about 2.3%. Just above North Carolina's 2.7%. Now you look at like New York, their density rate is over 20%. You look at Hawaii, their union density rate's over 24%. And you wonder why those workers make better wages, have better health care, have better retirement security, why the standard of living is higher. Oh, I wonder. But what we know is that in right to bargain, high union density states, there's a better distribution of income. But sadly, what's happened over the years, as we've deindustrialized, as we've lost those factories that were heavily unionized, as those communities lost their labor unions, the Republican Party walked away from them. Because there used to be pro-labor Republicans. There were. There were Republicans who didn't want to gut labor protections, didn't want to gut minimum wage laws, didn't want to gut prevailing wage laws, didn't want starvation and desperation working conditions. And go figure, because they had a vested interest. People would vote for them. So they had to be on the side of working people. But as those unions went away, because the factory went away, and I heard this a lot when we did our Working Class Heroes tour. Well, the unions abandoned us. No, the unions had nothing left here. The jobs were gone. The union is not something that's an outside entity. The union is the workers. The union is the people who are the members. That's who the union is. And this is what Republicans have done masterfully over the years. They've divorced people from their institutions. They've divorced people from their organizations. It's the government instead of our government. This is our country. This is our government. It's the union instead of it's our union. We pay dues to it. We elect the people who represent us. We fight for better wages, hours, conditions. Instead, they want you to think that it's its outside entity that it's a car insurance. It's not. It's participatory. It's active based. And that's what scares them. And that's why someone like McMaster's knows, in a state that has the lowest union density rate in the country, if that idea that, hey, I can make my life better by joining a union and bargaining, maybe I'll do that. Now, understand, he's all ripped off because this is evidently a case that may go before the Supreme Court, not sure yet, that has to do with the state's Port Authority and the International Longshoremen's Association. The state has always done the crane operators' jobs. There's a case going on that this could be done by workers instead of state workers, which they would have the ability to join unions, which is driving the state crazy. So he's a little bit upset by that. But in his speech, And I'm sure you've heard me say before, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do. He said, we will not let our state's economy suffer or become collateral damage as labor unions seek to consume new jobs and conscript new dues-paying members. And we will not allow the Biden administration's pro-union policies to chip away at South Carolina's sovereign interest. And you go, what sovereign interests are you talking about? Low wages? Lower health insurance coverage? Lower retirement security coverage? Less safe workplaces? What positive are you referring to? Or is it the higher profits, the more exploitation? What is it, Governor, that you are pursuing? And this is where I come back to, we as working people get hung up in our red hat, blue hat fight. I don't get hung up in that. It's never been about red hat, blue hat for me. It's never been about black or white for me. It's always been about green. It's always been about fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, opportunities to make the lives of working people better. Look, our billionaire class, they've got tons of people who are looking out for them. They do. They're going to be fine. I'm worried about the people like me who get up every morning, drive to work, punch a clock, bust their behind, only to have that paycheck not go as far as it used to. And then to be told by a governor, hey, I'm gonna fight to the gates of hell to ensure that you working people don't have the opportunity to make your lives better. Now, South Carolina has 49,000, according to the census, 49,000 union members in the state. 49,000, that's it. They have 14,000, people who are getting union benefits. We'll call them freeloaders. They've got 14,000 freeloaders because South Carolina was one of the first no rights at work states that forbid mandatory union membership or dues. So you can be part of a be in a place where a collective bargaining agreement exists, and you get all the benefits, but you can basically freeload off of that. But here's what we know, and I go back to this because this is important. In places that have union contracts, higher wages, better health care, better retirement, safer working conditions. We know that. I simply have no idea why you don't fight for that. Now, the UAW, we talked about this last week. The UAW has come out and endorsed Joe Biden. There was no way they were ever going to endorse Donald Trump. And in fact, Sean Fain said, I can't fathom any union would support Donald Trump for president. Let's be real and let's look at the facts. And I tweeted out, I said, every labor leader, including the leader of my union, the Teamsters, I think Sean O'Brien should learn this phrase. I can't fathom why any union would support Donald Trump for president. Let's be real and let's look at the facts. The facts are Donald Trump was terrible for labor. Donald Trump was one of the worst presidents in my lifetime for working people. That's the fact. Life got worse. Working conditions got less safe. Wages went down. But you hear this revisionist history. Oh, everything was amazing. My Teamster president, Sean O'Brien, has a nice picture of him doing the thumbs up down to Mar-a-Lago. And they're going to evidently have a round table. They keep poking that bear. Maybe they will endorse him. Maybe remember that it was Joe Biden who helped secure the multi-employer pension funds, the Butch-Lewis Act that helped save the Central States pension funds. One that, if my grandfather was still alive, would still be collecting from. And the millions of workers who depend on those pensions. Donald Trump did nothing and would do nothing ever to help working people. So facts matter. Not alternative facts, but real facts. And not red hat, blue hat, but green. because those workers that got the help, just like the UAW workers who saved their jobs, are the people who have the calluses on their hands from a hard day's work, who take a shower at the end of the day, whose bodies are a little more broken down at the end of the day, at the end of another week, at the end of another year. That's reality. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something in your mind, by all means, I want to hear it. What do you think? Where do you think we should go? What do you think we should do? Going to take a quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day striking worker Anna Lopiazzo was shot and killed by local police during the pivotal Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts. In what is considered one of the most important strikes in American labor history, the industrial workers of the world had organized a strike that brought out more than 30,000 textile mill workers at the American Woolen Company. Workers had been on strike for most of the month, picketing, marching, giving speeches, and stopping scabs. Their banners demanded a living wage and dignity, bread and roses. That day, there were workers' parades among pitched battles between strikers, police, and scabs. Gunfire erupted. According to Big Bill Haywood, 19 witnesses saw police officer Oscar Benoit shoot Anna Lopiazzo. The shooting provided the mill owners with an opportunity to crack down on the strike. Martial law was instituted, and all public meetings and marches were banned. The leading IWW strike organizers, John Edor and Arturo Giovannetti, were arrested for her murder, despite the fact that they were 2 miles away from the scene. Though they were eventually acquitted, their imprisonment removed them from directing the day-to-day work of the strike. But who was Anna Lopiazzo? According to Bruce Watson, author of Bread and Roses, Mills, Migrants, and the Struggle for the American Dream, if America had a tomb of the unknown immigrant paying tribute to the millions of immigrants known only to God and distant cousins compiling family trees, Anna Lopiazzo would be a prime candidate to lie in it. And indeed she was for 88 years, until retired IBEW 2321 business manager David Morris worked to get a headstone decorated with the Bread and Roses symbol of grain stalks and a rose for her pauper's grave. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So there was an interesting story I came across that, you know, it's one of those things that's just so outrageous that it's true. That evidently people in my state of Pennsylvania are going to Wawa to go to the bathroom because the price of water has gotten so expensive. Because we've privatized a lot of our water services. Because, you know, hey, privatization was all the rage. And I remember when, you know, communities were going, well, you know, we're tapped out and we don't want to raise taxes, so we're going to sell off our water and sewer. We're going to sell off our infrastructure, our parking, our prisons. We're going to sell off all this stuff so we can get a little bit of cash to help us get through a strap period. And then, you know, we won't have to make the investments and the upgrades and the things that we would need to get this service to people. It's a win-win, we were told. And I remember that being thrown at me a lot as I was going, no, it's a bad idea. Privatization is a bad idea. In every form, privatization is terrible. And over the weekend had a beer with a Trump supporter and his son, who is much further left. And interestingly enough, both of them were telling horror stories of privatization from, you know, one who works at NASA, one who was in the military, how we, and look, this is not new. This is stuff we've talked about for years on this program, how we privatized the military supply chain, how during Iraq, basically it was Halliburton who was our supply chain, and how expensive it was to get food and water and plywood and basic necessities to our soldiers, where in the past it was a military supply chain. There were soldiers doing this work. Now it was military contractors, people making huge money, a lot more money than the soldiers were making. And they were in it for the moneyed interest, not because they were defending the country or anything like that. And, look, NASA, same thing. The reality is we've outsourced most of that. We don't do anything for ourselves anymore because we were sold on this idea that privatization was great. So am I surprised that people are running down to the local Wawa to use the bathroom? No, it doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is more people aren't doing it. And what surprises me is we're putting up with it. This is the thing that blows my mind. Where's the outrage? You want outrage, Candy? You want something to be ticked off about? You want something to get all fired up about? Think about all of the stuff that was stolen from us, sold off for trinkets. And they're trying to do it to our education system. Because we've been trained like Pavlovian dogs to, when we think about, the private sector, they do everything more efficiently and better and cheaper, and it's better for us. You go down the list of all of the wonders of the private sector, and then the public sector is all bad. It's all bad. It's a bureaucracy. It's slow. It's no good. It's what we've been trained, and interestingly enough, it has worked because they have taken from us our assets. They have taken from us the commons. The things we once did for ourselves, and they are lining their pockets. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the working class, you get to work more. You get to work longer. You get to work without a retirement. Is that not something to be really upset about? I kind of think it is. For our free speech TV audience, I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time. For our radio affiliates, we're going to take a quick break right back after this. For both, if you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. I also want to hear from you. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Marjorie Three Names is back at it again. You remember not too long ago she called for a national divorce. She wants the red states and the blue states to divvy up because of immigration and some other things. Basically anything decent. She's opposed to. But she's back at it again, said, when I said that we needed a national divorce, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And a serious example, because she's talking about what's going on at the Texas border. And again, I'm listening to people and the ramped up rhetoric, this almost call for civil war. I've seen people on social media, they've got their guns out like they're gonna join up to the militia and head down to Texas. In fact, I had a number of people ask me, do you think we're going to have a civil war? No, we're not. Going to have some idiots cause some chaos, I think. But I'm not seeing the civil war thing. But here to share some thoughts on what's going on down in Texas, and also the fact that we can't seem to get anything done in Congress when there's a bipartisan immigration deal that could be had. And here to share some thoughts on all of that, I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you make of Marjorie Three Names here saying we need a national divorce? We need Texas to be able to secede.
Well, there's one thing in that whole equation we need to know. Which state is she going to live in? We need to know so we can not live in that state if it happens, all right? Got to know that one. Yeah, for her to even suggest that's civil war, and that that's not even, well, it's red meat maybe to some, but it's not even red meat in general, because who wants to go to a civil war? Although the issue of immigration, no question about it, is probably superseding right now any talk of the economy. The economy's up there, I understand that, but immigration's it's way up the flagpole on issues. No doubt about it.
It seems interesting to me, though, because it seems interesting that because there's been some really good economic news here lately, I'm sure you've seen. It seems interesting that now we have all this immigration stuff popping up so that it takes away from the economic news. It seems like at interesting times, the border issue keeps being pulled back into the main consciousness of the country, by some right-wing media outlets that make sure that the outrage candy's out. It just seems very convenient to me.
Well, the Republicans under McCarthy, it started with McCarthy when he was Speaker, Rick. As you know, we reported on this on your show. McCarthy started it to pull the border issue into the equation. And of course, Speaker Johnson continued it. So that was something they were building up, because on one hand, you go after President Biden with the inflation and the gasoline and the economics. And also, the Biden administration and the political forces and the money people didn't do the job they needed to do at the time to have an offense to this, to talk about the projects that were out there, to talk about what the piece of legislation actually did that Biden passed. Now, they didn't do that, so they gave the Republicans a moving target there, but they gave the Republicans the ability to start to go after the economic issue. The Biden administration has started. Janet Yellen last week, President went on a couple projects. I don't remember exactly which state. I think Wisconsin was one of them. And they're having some surrogates talk about the economy. Plus, as we know, interest rates are probably going to be reduced by the Fed, most likely 3 times. So having said all of that, you've got to have another issue. Until that one either goes a little haywire or maybe inflation comes back a little bit, you've got to have a secondary issue. So you pull out of the drawer the issue that McCarthy as Speaker started and Johnson started. But something happened. As you're pulling this out of the drawer to throw it out there, you have a guy named Donald Trump that says, wait a minute, no, I can make the perfect deal. Stop it. This is not a good deal. So meanwhile, Langford, a Republican senator, and Chris Murphy, a Democrat senator, have already got the wheels turning. And a lot of members said, yeah, that's a good idea. And then Donald Trump steps in. Some of them say, well, I don't know about that idea. That's what's going on. Now, technically, and I don't care what they say because they won't say this publicly, technically, Trump stepped on the Republicans' plan. Let this thing matriculate. Let it filter out. You start the attacks, this and that. And, of course, Trump makes border a number one issue. And Biden now, frankly, has had, an awareness now that, hey, this is a problem. So the president's willing to do some things that maybe he wasn't 2 or 3 years ago to anger some of his base. If you're going to do a deal, you're going to anger both sides.
Yeah, no,
you're going to anger them.
That's how any good deal is. Everybody's mad. And that's one of the first things I learned in negotiating contracts. If everybody's upset, it's probably not a bad deal, because you didn't get everything you wanted. You got some of the things you wanted, you needed, but you didn't get everything. Right. So everyone walks away not getting everything they wanted. But, you bring up the, Langford, who I got to tell you, if Langford's involved with something and he's on the side of being in favor of it, I'm going to be a little cautious in signing on to it. Just because of who he is. But the fact that, Murphy and him have this bipartisan deal, that the text hasn't been released. We don't know what the deal is. And then you have Trump come out and say, I'm against it. So a bunch of Republicans go, I'm against it too, without actually having read what the bill is. Kind of curious. Kind of makes me go, wouldn't you want to read it first before you're against it?
Right. And Langford's been criticized, by the GOP. Look, Steny Hoyer, who up to last year was the number 2 ranking leader in the Democrat, structure, Steny Hoyer and I, when we did the Help America Vote Act, in the Senate, we had McConnell, Dodd, and Ted Kennedy, right? Now, when we did that, the White House, by the way, they were making private phone calls saying, I don't think we want to stir that up. I don't think we want to do this. And we're like, shh, just stay low, follow us. So we were allowed to do that. At that time, had Bush come out and, done what Trump has done, it might be a different picture what I'm talking about today.
Yeah.
In those days, the White House kind of sat back and waited till the Congress worked its will. That's not happening because of a political candidate right now. Now, I will tell you, this is probably one of the greatest times, at least from my point of view, from when I served there in the 16 years, since I've been out of there. This is one of the greatest moments in probably 30 years to be able to get a border bill. And so that's kind of the sad part of it, because someone can say, well, when Trump gets in, well, what happened last time when Trump got in? What happened? I'll throw that out there. Where was the border bill?
There was none.
Crickets.
Yeah. And where's the Republicans control the House? Where's their bill?
Exactly. So this is a great opportunity. I just don't know how it's going to play out. I highly doubt it will be successful. Although I will say this, if Langford and Murphy can get something out of the Senate and it gets to the House, and enough Democrats and maybe 100 Republicans can, feel the pressure to do something, it might have a chance. I highly doubt that.
Yeah.
Trump's intervention in this is obviously throwing cold water on it. The Senate will continue. If you're Langford and Murphy, how do you stop now? How do you say, oh, well, I'm going to stop? I think Langford risks, even though the GOP's all over him in Oklahoma, they're going to sanction him. What are they really going to do to him? But he does risk a lot of heat for this. I just don't think those two particularly can stop, which is probably healthy for the system to at least continue to have some kind of debate on this issue.
But we don't know what's in this bill. What is it that can possibly be in there? I mean, because you have these polar opposite views. And,
right.
You have the slam the door, nobody gets in, ironclad, big walls, deep trenches, moats with alligators. And then you have the swing the doors open and what can be in here that would make the situation better?
Well, I think you'd have border security. They would have to come to terms with DACA, with the Dreamers, give them an instant path to citizenship. They were brought here or born here. They didn't know it. That's got to be the premise to begin with this. Now, there's other issues. How do you approach asylum? How do you define asylum? Is not having a job asylum? Or does it go back to being, threatened to be killed, or political harassment based on, your gender, or based on your sexual identity, or, based on your political beliefs? So there's going to have to be a definition of that. But there's a giving on both sides, and there's got to be some border security. What they're doing is they're picking, meaning I think it was maybe Johnson or Trump himself, but they're picking out one point now where the figure leaped out of the discussions of, 5,000 people a day, or 5,000 people a week coming in illegally, or 8,000 people in one day allows the president to make an emergency closure of the border in regards to asylum. So they're picking that out, saying, oh, so they're going to allow 8,000 people a day to come across here. The problem with looking at the big picture on this is that they're taking out one component. As far as I'm concerned, if I was in the House and I wanted to solve this, let them go with 8,000 in one day. Let them go with 5,000. There's a House, a Senate, a conference committee. You can reduce that figure somewhat. You can give the president more emergency powers. They're going to pick out, if you want to kill this bill, I can kill it talking as a Democrat. I can kill it talking as a Republican. You and I could kill it in 3.5 minutes, pick our sides, and then we'll switch sides.
Yeah, no,
you do the Republican, I'll do the Democrat.
Yeah, as my grandfather always said, any idiot with a hammer can tear down a house. It takes a craftsman to build one. And it's the same thing with this kind of legislation. I mean, if you're looking to kill something, it's not hard. But to take on this kind of a complex situation, to where you've got so many stakeholders and so much in it. It's complex, and with it being so complex, there are so many opportunities to do just that. And look, I think Trump is going to torpedo it. I think Republicans have been very clear. They don't want to do anything until Trump's president, which means they don't ever want to do anything.
Well, Speaker Johnson, look, he got away with keeping the government open, which, by the way, I think was a good deal to do. But, in Matt Gaetz's eyes, it's putting him in the I'm going to vacate the seat moment. But the Speaker got away with that. He got away with agreeing with numbers with Schumer. All right. But this is one he probably couldn't get away with because Trump intervened. Prior to that, Speaker Johnson was tying, Ukraine aid to the border. We're going to have the border. And then all of a sudden, that one line, you and I talked about it on your show, that one line where the Speaker came out and said, well, this is pretty comprehensive. I don't know if we can do it all. That was like the day before Trump came out and said, This is a bad bill. So obviously somebody picked up the telephone to the Speaker's office.
Somebody whispered in his ear. No,
yes.
It'll be interesting to see because we need to do something. I mean, you look at this, and I've been saying for the longest time that the issue is more important than the solution to some politicians, because it's there's an industry built around this issue, not fixing it but exploiting it. And we need to be. Someone emailed me and said, we need to be fixated on fixing it instead of fixated on destroying things, and this is part of this. I mean, I wish they would be fixated on solving problems as opposed to just exploiting them.
It's just, and I've heard this 1,000 times when I was in office, and it just made me always infuriated. This isn't the time. Wait till after the election. Well, wait till a year after the election. Wait till after the midterms. There's like never a time, for some of these things. And I used the Help America Vote Act. When we started, we had very complicated issues. And so what we did, Ted Kennedy and Mitch McConnell and Steny Hoyer and myself and some other core members, 5 maybe or 6 from each party, we just held firm to say, we're going to keep going. And we kept going. It took 2 years. I hope that Murphy and Langford, no matter what, I hope for public policy's future, I hope they continue on, no matter what lashings they get, even if it fails.
Right. I
hope they continue on, because then that sets the stage that, hey, we got this far one time in our history, and maybe after the election, like I said, I hate to say that, they can do something else. So even if it's dead on arrival from Donald Trump, I hope the two of them continue on to make people continue to be conscious on this. But I will restate this. In 30 years, we have never had a better opportunity than right now to do something about the border.
No, we most certainly do need to do it. I got to get your thoughts on the reports of 3 American soldiers killed and a dozen more injured in a drone attack in Jordan. Iran's, evidently responsible for it. You lived in Iran. You have, pretty solid understanding of what's going on in that region. What happened, and what do you think the response here is going to be?
Well, if we look at the history of Iran, of course, it's a long, complicated situation with the United States, and they took our hostages. We got an Iran nuclear deal. They were rolling back the centrifuges. The moderates of Iran were practically held on people's shoulders in parades in Tehran. Everybody was happy with them. Then the nuclear deal got canceled in Trump's second year. When it got canceled, the clerics, the ultra right-wing, clerics who live in the 12th century in their minds said, you see what the great Satan does to you. You see what these moderate Iranians did to you. So the clerics rule. Now the clerics feel that the way that they can attack back at Saudi Arabia, of course, through his proxy war in Yemen, and Saudi's on one side, but also it's now spilling into the Gulf due to the Israel-Gaza situation. So having said that, we have done drone strikes that have killed Iranian-backed militants, and I think some Iranians might have been killed, but Iranian-backed militants, they've done a drone strike on us. It's tragic that we have lost 3 American soldiers. Let's make no bones about that. And retaliation by the United States with drone attacks back on the Iranian-backed militants is one thing to fight back. Here's the problem. When you have people like Lindsey Graham saying strike Iranian soil, That is a problem. The Iranians, through the militants, have struck us. It's a proxy thing. We're striking back through drone attacks. To go on Iranian soil is a, can you say Iraq? Because if you can say Iraq, multiply Iran 10 times that.
Yeah.
We trained the Iranians. They used to come to Texas. We trained them to fly. Generationally, they trained other flyers. Iran is not Iraq. And I'm telling you, it would be a fierce 20-year unbelievable battle to strike Iranian soil. They have struck us, we have struck them, and we can strike back. And, you know, and again, our sympathies to the soldiers' families, but striking, as Lindsey Graham wants to, on Iranian soil is a different world. I don't know why they don't give him his own jet fighter and let him go. You know?
You go ahead. No, but you know, and
Yeah.
you bring up an interesting point, because you know I had spoken to a military expert, you know, probably about 8-10 years ago, when the last time we were rattling the sabers to go into Iran, and he said if you think Iraq was fun, just wait till they go into Iran, because they actually have planes that fly and guns that shoot.
Right.
And as you pointed out,
they have fierce fighters.
And as you pointed out, we trained them. And that's a pretty big thing. That's a pretty big freaking deal.
Right. And Iran is advanced, and their fighters are fighters. Now look, many Iranian people like us, despite what you see in the media or what you hear, they like us. But if it comes to attacking Iran, we will have given the clerics everything they need.
Yeah.
Everything. Attacking the surrogates back and killing them, or if there are Iranians in Syria and they get killed, that's one thing. After all, Trump hit General Ghassami. But striking their soil, that would be another. They would, the clerics would be able to, absolutely get the vast majority of Iranians behind them because they're attacked on their soil. But beyond that, this would not be Iraq. We would be into a conflict that, $1 trillion or two, and maybe 25 years.
You don't see Biden.
20.
You don't see Biden doing that.
No, I think if Biden does this, because look, same thing when the Iraq issue came up. Let's go get him. Let's go get him. Once you go get him, the public says, well, wait a minute. I didn't know that was going to happen. Well, I didn't know it was going to cost this. I didn't know that many soldiers were going to die. And I can't imagine in my wildest dreams that President Biden would launch a missile onto Iranian soil.
No,
I just can't imagine where it would happen. Retaliate back, yes. Launch a missile on Iranian soil, no.
No, we will see. But Bob, as always, I appreciate the thoughts. Thanks so much for the information, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Rick. Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Sometimes you have to sit down in order to stand up for your rights as a worker. That's what workers in the Firestone rubber plant proved in Akron, Ohio on this date in labor history. The year was 1936. Akron, Ohio was the heart of the rubber industry in the United States, employing upwards of 40,000 workers at its peak. But during the Great Depression, as many as half of these workers were laid off. The rubber workers had unionized, but the bosses in the factories demanded the speed up of labor, added more hours to the workday, and harassed union leaders. They did this because they knew if workers walked off the job to protest the unreasonable demands, desperate, unemployed workers stood by at the ready to replace the strikers as scab labor. Frustrated, workers at Firestone decided to simply turn off the machines and sit down in the factory. Rubber workers had first tried out this tactic on a smaller scale 3 years earlier. The tactic proved to be successful because factory owners could not bring replacement labor into an occupied factory without risking damage to their equipment. Sit-down strikes occurred throughout the rubber plants in Akron, forcing owners to the negotiating table. The wave of sit-down strikes spread throughout the country. On this success, a wave of sit-down strikes spread throughout the country. In places like Flint, Michigan, where United Auto Workers occupied a General Motors plant for 40 days. And places like Hershey, Pennsylvania, where chocolate workers sat down for better wages, hours, and conditions. These sit-down strikes helped usher in an era of expanded union recognition. Sitting down on the job helped these workers to win a seat at the bargaining table. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So I think one of my favorite articles recently was over at the Washington Post, written by a woman named Megan McArdle. Megan had an opinion piece stating that capping overdraft fees could actually hurt poor families. And she goes through this thing about basically laying out that banks are making huge amounts of money off of poor families, poor people who, they're the ones who, unfortunately, are the ones who overdraft their accounts and just get slammed. And what banks used to do masterfully is they would take the bigger checks first so that the money would come out first, and then in larger amounts, so that the smaller checks would be later, so that those would be the ones that bounced, so that they could nail you for multiple. And they did this on purpose. This wasn't an accident. This was something they would do. So if you had $1,000 in your account and you wrote a check for $900 and one for $100 and one for $50 and one for $25 and one for $1, they would get the two big ones out of the way. Okay, the money's all gone, and then nail you for the the other three bounce checks. Instead of doing the four lower ones and nail you with one, they got more fees out of you. That's their gig. So I'm reading through some of these stories of how what's remarkable to me is, as you know, Biden is trying to do something to cap what banks can charge people for overdraft fees, because I'll tell you, they're outrageous. And trying to do something on bringing out into the public view some of the fees that these corporations have been just stiffing us over. It's been one of my great angering moments that anytime you go to anything, a sporting event, a concert, a play, whatever, no matter where you go, corporate America is nickel and diming you to death. We went to a Philadelphia 76ers game not too long ago. And, I think the tickets were like $30 a piece, and it cost us $50 to park the car. And it's one of those things where you go, it's just crazy. It's crazy money for us to park the car. And I'm old enough to remember when that's not how it was. And, I look at what corporate America has gotten away with. I remember, years ago, overdraft fees, again, this is going back a while, were only a couple bucks. Someone told me they got hit with a $50 overdraft fee. And I'm going, $50 taking money that you don't have, they know you don't have. And it just seems, again, kicking people while they're down. Now, her argument is, well, they may stop letting people have banks. And this is where I go, this is where I'm a big supporter of public banking. Where if the private sector won't do it, the public sector should. And, here's the other idea. I know a lot of people don't have the income to be able to survive. How about we raise wages? How about we raise the minimum wage? How about we give people the ability to join and form unions so they make a living wage? Don't hear much about that. But I did read the story about Jeff Bezos, who, when he was a teenager, he was such an industrious child that he could crack 300 eggs in a Saturday morning with one hand. There's actually an article out there talking about how incredible Jeff Bezos is and why we need billionaires. what we're force fed, the kind of ridiculous nonsense that we get shoved down our throat every day is just remarkable to me. And the sooner I come back to the sooner we wake up and say we should stop, maybe the better it's going to be. Just my thoughts. But I most certainly want to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I want to hear what you think, what's on your mind. By all means, share. You got any billionaire stories of, because Bezos can crack 300 eggs. One hand. Rick@thericksmithshow.com. You miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.